Good afternoon, everyone. Just want to make sure everyone's in the right session. This is the session on the intersection of individuals with disability and the criminal justice system. The expansion of mass incarceration during the past 60 years in the U.S. is unprecedented. With more than 1.2 million people incarcerated in prisons, the U.S. is a global leader in incarceration. Importantly, disability prevalence has been found to be higher among incarcerated compared with non-incarcerated people. Individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities encounter the criminal justice system in various roles: as suspects, defendants, incarcerated individuals, victims, or witnesses. Unfortunately, people with disabilities are disproportionately infected by the system. They are more likely to experience victimization, arrest, criminal charges, and longer prison sentences compared to those without disabilities. Once entangled with the criminal justice system, people with disabilities face unique challenges, bias, inaccessible services, perpetuating the cycle of criminal justice involvement. Today's panel will be a conversation on the intersectional work amongst disability advocacy, law enforcement, and reintegration programs. We're here to learn and understand how policing impacts people with disabilities and how to help improve positive interactions and minimize negative interactions between people with disabilities and the criminal justice system. I am Dr. LaDawn Robinson, and I serve as Regional Director for the Pittsburgh Regional Office of the PHRC. And welcome to this session. As your moderator, I'm going to facilitate this discussion on behalf of you, the audience, and the audience's questions and answers. We do have a hybrid audience, as you know, so I will be fielding questions from our virtual audience and from our physically present audience. My preference as a moderator is to have an engaging conversation. So I will be talking to you and asking questions to you, the audience. It is not about me, the moderator. The panelists here are the subject matter experts, and they are going to drop knowledge that is valuable and awesome for us to learn today. Now, I know there will be questions, and the goal is to have a Q&A at the end of the session, but I will go with the energy of the room, and if we need to ask questions during the panel session, I'm flexible to do that as well. Our last-minute housekeeping item is that to please place your phones on silent during this session. So let's meet our extraordinary panelists. I'm so very excited to have them in this conversation today. So first, our first panelist walking to the stage is Captain Vincent D'Angelo, Director of the Equality and Inclusion Office for Pennsylvania State Police. Captain D'Angelo enlisted with the Pennsylvania State Police in 1999. As he progressed through the ranks, he served in various investigative and command positions throughout southeastern Pennsylvania. In April 2023, Captain D'Angelo was named as the Director of the Equality and Inclusion Office within the PSP. Captain D'Angelo earned a Bachelor of Arts in International Studies and Economics, as well as a Master of Public Policy degree from the American University, Washington, D.C. Captain D'Angelo is also a graduate of the Northwestern University School of Police Staff and Command. The focus of the Equality and Inclusion Office is to ensure fair and equitable treatment of all department personnel, while also ensuring that police services are provided to the public in a non-discriminatory fashion. In his current position, Captain D'Angelo oversees EEO-related programs and activities within the PSP. Captain D'Angelo and the Equality and Inclusion Office provide internal training and guidance to ensure the department and its personnel remain compliant with the applicable laws and policies. Our second panelist is Caitlin Wahlberger, and I apologize if I just butchered your name. Division Director of Specialty Supervision, who is employed by the Lancaster County Adult Probation and Parole Services. In that role, Caitlin is responsible for overseeing the operations of the Domestic Violence Unit, Sex Offender Unit, Electronic Monitoring Unit, Transfer Unit, Treatment Court Unit, Assessment Unit, and Behavioral Health Neurodevelopmental Disorders Unit. Prior to her time as Division Director, she served as the Crisis Intervention Team, CIT, Training Coordinator for Lancaster County for approximately 6 years. This position was hands down her favorite, as her passion is the intersection of behavioral health with the criminal justice system. She served as a general probation parole officer in both York and Lancaster counties for approximately 3 years prior to her promotion with CIT. Caitlin holds a master's degree in counseling psychology from Loyola University, Maryland, and graduated with a dual bachelor's degree from Elizabethtown College in psychology and criminal justice. She is proudly married to a local police corporal and is the mom of 5-year-old triplets. Wow. Okay. And our third panelist, who's been with us all day, and I'm going to, your last name, so I apologize, Stephen Solowata, close, okay, Classification Program Manager at SCI Albion. Stephen earned his master's degree from Gannett University in clinical mental health counseling in 2014. He soon after began his career with the Department of Corrections as a psychological services specialist at SCI Mercer. He was promoted to unit manager at SCI Albion, where he was tasked with leading the development of the Neurodevelopmental Residential Treatment Unit. So let's welcome all three of our panelists. Okay. So like I mentioned at the beginning, this is a conversation, and I love the energy, so we're just going to flow with this topic. So I am going to actually open up this conversation with a very general question. So I would like our panelists to think for a second about the topic of this session, which is the intersection of disability in the criminal justice system. And I would like each panelist to share with our audience, why is this topic important right now? Like, why are we talking about this topic? Steve, would you like to go first? You looked at me.
Sure. It's an important topic, mainly because these individuals come into our care. And from my perspective, working in the prison system, they come into our care, and we really need to make sure we give them the best treatment we possibly can prior to them re-entering society.
Okay.
We need to be prepared to do that.
Caitlin?
Yeah. There we go.
I know it's a little bit intimidating to have this on you.
Sorry. I don't know if it's like, yeah? Okay, good. So being in the community side of things, we had all joked, like, one of us arrests them, one of us cares for them, and then one of us has them for sometimes months or years after they get out of jail or prison. And so just the number of individuals that we're seeing in the community once they get out, and some of the challenges that they may face, and having officers who are trained in all of the ins and outs of what those disabilities may bring, what it looks like, how to properly access care. It's just something that we're starting to see more and more of. And so in my county, we're having a lot of conversations about what that access to care looks like. Do we have the appropriate programs, resources, things like that. So that's kind of a major focus for us currently.
And Captain?
I think from the state police perspective, one of the things we're always worried about is fairness. You know, we want to make sure that we treat everyone fairly, regardless of what condition you might be in. And that's not just when we deal with people on the street. That's also, you know, we're one of the larger state agencies. We employ a lot of people. So from an employment perspective, we're looking to make sure that we're getting the best people we can, and that means we're casting a wide net. We want to make sure that we're not missing any group, any segment of society when we do our hiring. So again, it comes back to fairness. We want to make sure that we're fair in how we treat people on the street. We want to make sure we're fair in our hiring processes, and I think for us that's a big deal. That's an important thing for us to be focused on.
Thank you, Captain. Now, you mentioned the word fair a few times, and that caused me to start thinking that as our law enforcement and maybe called in to a situation on a scene, and so what are the challenges with law enforcement when they engage with someone and they may know or they may not know that that particular person may have an intellectual or developmental disability? What are some of the challenges when they're in that situation?
Well, I think regardless of who we're dealing with, we're looking to successfully communicate what we want them to do. We also want them to be successful in communicating their perspective to us, so we make a correct decision on where to go. So it comes down to communication. So we want to make sure that if someone has a disability, a cognitive disability, how are we able to successfully communicate with them, understand what they're asking, what their situation is from their perspective, and then also communicate back to them in a way that's successful. If I'm trying to communicate A and they're not hearing A, they're hearing B, they're processing B, we're not going to be very successful. So that's something that is very important to us to make sure that we can communicate effectively so that we have a successful resolution to the issue.
Now that's very interesting, because as you're talking about communication, bringing Caitlin now into this conversation, when you do the training with law enforcement, is training them how to communicate in that situation, is that part of the training that you have with law enforcement? If so, can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So CIT training, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it is a week-long 40-hour training, and it only is able to really honestly scratch the surface of everything that we probably could touch on. We spend a lot of time talking about mental health and IDD, what it looks like, some of the symptoms, best practices with treatment, how to work with some of these folks. So we spend, I'd say, probably 6 hours on that topic. And then a vast bulk of the training is really just on skills on how to talk to people. And one of the things that I really like to emphasize is that these skills work on everybody. So it's not just using them when you're on a call, when you're dealing with someone who's hostile, when you're dealing with someone who may be in a crisis state. These skills work with everyone. It really just comes back to active listening skills. That's really what it is. And then once we go through all of that process, we spend about 4 hours just talking about what those skills are, what that looks like, the nonverbals, all of those kinds of things. Then we actually put them through their least favorite part of the training, which is the scenario portion, where we have other officers who have gone through the training. They come in and they kind of act out scenes, and so they then get to use what they've learned in that week of training and put it into practice. So then hopefully they're able to kind of fall back on some of those things when they're out in the street. It's not necessarily lifelike in the sense it's in a classroom, you know, we know there's no one that's going to jump out and lunge or any of those kinds of things, but it's just really honing those skills and trying to focus on just falling back to those active listening skills because they're so, so important.
Thank you. Now, I want to bring Stephen into the conversation because communication, like you say, is very important with, of course, law enforcement as they are engaging with everyone in their community, and that's part of the your training. But I would think, Steve, that in your program, and you can talk about your program a little bit more so we can become more aware, that teaching them their communication skills is important as well as life skills, job skills, and retaining that job once they're out. Can you talk about that?
Right, so this goes both ways. This goes the way of staff. We train all of our staff in CIT as well that work in the mental health units. And we've also partnered with outside agencies like the Office of Developmental Programs, the Barber National Institute. These folks have come in and helped us see things from a different perspective, learn and grow in how we approach those in our care, and that goes a long way. And we actually have excellent staff buy-in in that regard. So, you know, people want to learn, and it's really awesome to see when you see corrections officers taking the time to actively listen and working well with the population. On the other end, we actually found out when we were going in to look at the programming, what are we going to offer the inmates in our care that we have? You start looking around for treatment, and there's not a lot out there for adults with developmental disabilities currently. If there was a lot of child like worksheets and stuff like that, but we stumbled upon the PEERS program that was developed by UCLA, and it is actually a evidence-based program for working with adults with autism. So we've been using that, and that's part of, we do role plays, we run the group weekly, and you can see the benefit right in front of us on how people on both sides, officers and inmates, how we're all communicating. And I think that everybody's learning a lot on both sides.
Thank you. I find it interesting. I'm going to pull role play in scenarios like Caitlin talked about, and start asking the question. We kind of discussed it when we had our meet and greet on the training. Caitlin, I know you talked about helping the law enforcement on what they should do, when they're interacting with someone with a disability. But also, what should bystanders do? What should relatives, friends, other, community, their neighbors, who they may know that their community member has a intellectual or developmental disability, an IDD, but they want to engage with that law enforcement to inform them of that, but they want to do it safely. What should someone do in that situation?
Yeah, I think it's situation dependent, right? Is the scene safe? What does all of that look like? Is it just we've gone to a house, everyone's calm, cool, collected, we can have a conversation, or is it chaos, there's people yelling, there's multiple people, we don't know who is who at this point? All of those factors are going to kind of change the way that we would want to handle that. I first always like to recommend to people, if this is something that they have in their county, we have several departments who have started a special needs registry. So that's something that you can alert your department that you live in, that you have a person in your home who may need a little bit of extra time, care, support, so they already know that going in, so they already are aware of it. But if the scene is safe, of course, feel free to engage in that conversation, let them know. Oftentimes, the parent, the peer, the person in the home is the best resource of how to get a great outcome. You know their triggers, you know what may help. So sharing all of that is, of course, going to be extremely helpful. If the scene is a little more chaotic, the officer at that point is not sure, are you just a random person? Are you a person that lives in the home? If there's more than one officer there, I always encourage people to not talk with the officer who is directly engaged with that person. If there is someone else there who's maybe off to the side, maybe doing some crowd control, that would be the one that I would recommend that people go up and speak with and say, you know, hey, I am so-and-so's mom, dad, support person. These are some things that may be helpful. Just because at that point, the officer's trying to process so many factors. And so one more person just coming up and shouting, it's not gonna help in that moment. It could potentially just keep the scene a little more heightened. So if you can have maybe that side person there that you can have that conversation with, that would kind of be the approach that I would recommend.
So, Captain, I see you're nodding your head. I have a question for you. Do the troopers still work solo, or do they have partners now?
So it depends.
Okay.
I think on the midnight shift, we're typically having pairs in a car. I think Philadelphia has gone to, the troopers in Philadelphia are most of the time paired up. But in a lot of the state, there are a lot of times where there's just one trooper in the car.
Okay, and I asked that question because you were nodding your head, and Caitlin was talking about if there were two, law enforcement officers on the scene, but what would you encourage a individual, a bystander, family member to do if it's one state trooper and the scene is active, they're engaging with that individual, but me as a family member, relative, how should I engage with that state trooper in that particular situation?
Well, sometimes, even though there's one person in the car, there's still somebody else coming.
Okay.
So it's highly likely if you have a volatile situation, there's one there and there's probably somebody on their way. But the other thing, if we back up a second, I think it's important to take the opportunity to, when this call is being placed to either the 911 center or directly to the state police station or the municipal police station, to relay, hey, this person is having a mental health crisis. These are the triggers. These are things that work effectively with this person, so that as the officer, as the trooper is responding to the scene, he's getting or she's getting into the mindset of, okay, this is what I have. I have somebody who I may need to take a different communication track with. Flying up lights and siren might be not as effective as rolling up without my lights and siren going. That might actually, the 15 seconds it costs me in getting there might be 15 seconds well saved, because I'm not exasperating the situation. There might be times where we need those 15 seconds and we're still coming lights and sirens. But the point I'd like to make is that it's important to relay that information to the police as early as possible. But don't take that as, I got it. The police have that information. I told them exactly what the situation is. If the scene is calm and the first officer, the first trooper gets there, even though you already told that 911 operator, hey, this is what's going on, this is a way that I would suggest you effectively communicate with my loved one, reiterate to that first officer, to that first trooper, or if it's a little chaotic, that second officer, that second trooper, hey, this is what's going on. I mean, we have some fantastic dispatchers who work in the counties, who work for the state police, but sometimes the message does get lost, or the message is broadcast and, the officer, the trooper's got a million things running through his head and he just didn't process it correctly. So if you take that 1 minute to go up and say, hey, this is what's going on. My son has autism. My brother is having a mental health crisis, but this is what seems to work when we're trying to calm him down. That's, I think, going to be time well spent.
Oh.
Did I-
Okay, well, we have a question, please. Oh, can you state your name and then state who the question is for? Since, yeah, this is a little bit different. So you're going to have to start running a little bit earlier now. Thank you. I appreciate you, though.
I just want to get this question in. So I'm Tamara Shahade Cope. I'm one of the hearing examiners with the PHRC. And so, okay. So just going to repeat, I'm Tamara Shahade Cope. I'm one of the hearing examiners with the PHRC. Just wondering about, with regards to communication, when we're talking about individuals who have limited English proficiency, for example, it kind of adds another layer, right? Another obstacle between the individual and informing the officer what's happening. So I was just wondering if you'd, while we're kind of on this topic, if you'd be willing to share a little bit about your language access policies and what is the best way for someone to get your attention, someone who's responding to a scene, for example, and express that need for an interpreter so that they can also convey then whether someone is in crisis or has a disability.
So I think with the state police, we use a language line. So for something at the scene, if you pull us aside, if you had it pre-printed, hey, I speak this language, that's fantastic. If you don't, we have a form that's in all of our cars. There's probably 30 or so languages on there where it's written in the foreign language, and it basically says, I speak this, I need an interpreter. And if you point to that, then that would alert the individual trooper that, hey, I need to call the language line and tell them I need this specific language interpreter, and we'll get the information that we need. So on the scene, that's probably typically what we're going to do. We're going to call the language line, whether it's a scene of an incident, whether it's a traffic stop. If we're not able to communicate, all the troopers have that number they can call and get that translation service provided. If we're talking an in-depth interview where it's critical to understand the nitty-gritty of the details, we have state contracts for interpreters where we would bring in an interpreter who spoke that language to do the interview to make sure we got the accurate understanding of what's going on. At the scene of an incident, like when we're trying to figure it out instantly, it's probably not where we're going to have an interpreter come in. Although we do have a number of troopers who speak multiple languages. So if they were working and nearby, we would reach out to them. If there was no nearby trooper, the municipal police departments have lots of troopers or lots of officers who speak languages. We would reach out, hey, is there someone who speaks Hindi? Is there someone who speaks Spanish? And so we would ask for those resources. But it's a given that we know we need to effectively communicate with people regardless of whether they're proficient in English or not. Anybody else want to add?
We follow the same. I was going to say, we use the same service. It's mandated through the courts of the state that we use that. So we use the same service. We also have individuals in my office who they cannot translate or use any of those skills until they've passed a test. So it's not just, oh, I grew up in a Spanish-speaking home, I think I can muddle my way through this. They have to take a test and they have to pass it in order to use those skills. So if it were to be a language where we don't have that, then we would also use the language line. And then if it's very similar, if it's something, interview, a court proceeding, then we would have time to get that person in.
We use the same exact policies as well. However, on the specific unit that we developed, We also have a prison version of the picture exchange communication system. In the event someone's going through a nonverbal state or whatever, they're able to, we've gone through and we've taken pictures of everything on the unit, et cetera, so they're able to communicate. We also have adapted our commissary lists even for those that aren't able to read. They're able to look and see a picture of the item, circle the quantity of how much they want, and then so that promotes independence as well, which is awesome. And I do want to piggy off the previous question. As far as communication goes, one thing that we do for everyone coming in is they fill out an all about me. And we summarize this, and I have to credit the psychologist that opened the unit up for coming up with this. We call it the binder with profiles in it. And any officer has access to this in our control bubble on the unit. So you can look and see triggers, talking points that may help, their mental health history, including suicidality. All that is included on this All About Me page that every officer can see. So if we have someone who is elevated or escalated, they're able to look at this, and it's produced great results because it helps you approach. You know what not to say and things you can say to help the situation. So I didn't want to miss sharing that.
No, thank you for sharing that. And there's a question that's coming from our physical audience. I just want to ask though, with these kind of, I'll call it self-efficacy, is that part of some like the life skills and things that are that's being taught, so then when they're out, they can self-advocate for, or bring in loved ones that know and understand what to do in that situation as well?
Correct. We do allow video visiting and visiting.
Okay.
And also, family members often will call in and talk to our treatment staff and share things as well that help out tremendously. But self-efficacy is the main driving point on our unit.
Okay, thank you. State your name, please, and your question.
Hello. Hi, my name is Imani. Something you mentioned was a little bit concerning and somewhat alarming, which was the registries for special needs people. In a time in which there is a lot of tumultuous legislation going on, as well as Supreme Court overreach and things like that, it's somewhat alarming that there are disabled people being encouraged to be put on lists at this time. Have you considered, and have your departments considered, the far-reaching implications of people having access to those lists as it pertains to disabled people?
I can't speak for the departments, unfortunately. I know we have 3 departments in the county out of 26 that are utilizing it. So it's not something that is widely used across the county. It's just something that is out there that, of course, no one is forced or made to. It's only if they would like to. So I don't know if departments, what they've done with it in terms of access and all of that kind of thing. I'm just the relayer of a resource that's in my county. I'm sorry that I don't have more.
Question?
Hi, my name is Charlotte Bradley. I'm a PA realtor. I like to stay educated on disabilities and things from my legal background and being a parent of a disabled child and other, issues with regards to my community. So my question is, this is to Mr. D'Angelo. You said that you have a chart for people if there's a language barrier, basically, right? And it reads I speak this language, but a lot of people oftentimes, not only is this their second language, but they may come from a country where they couldn't afford education. So how do you overcome that obstacle? Do you have like a resource for that if they're unable to read to communicate that they speak that particular language?
Well, that's the challenge, is that someone who can't communicate to us what language they speak, it's difficult to find the right interpreter. So whether they may not know exactly what it says, because they may not have had the education to get to that point. Some of them, although they may not completely understand what it says, may recognize that those are words written in my language. And if that doesn't work, then we're going to keep trying. I mean, I don't have a list of, if this doesn't work, then we're out of luck. We might, if I were there, I'd probably be whipping out my phone saying, do you have, like, kind of show them the phone. And if they had their phone, I'd be looking in their phone for contacts. And I think that's the troopers, the municipal officers, they're used to, hey, if plan A doesn't work, I got to go with plan B, and they're going to try and think on their feet. I can't give you a list of this is the next step, but that's probably the first step that we're going to go to.
Okay, have you guys ever considered distributing flags where people can identify their country of origin and particular region, which would narrow down where they may be from and what language they may speak, as an alternative?
That's certainly an alternative. It's worth looking at. I think
Okay.
a lot of people would probably get to that point.
I think that would be a good alternative to consider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, thank you as well. And that causes me to also think about which is so important that folks in the community and loved ones also are, part of when people are in a situation, an active situation, dealing with a law enforcement officer, how they can speak on behalf of their loved one or their community member, which that's, I wanted to bring like Steve into that conversation on. It was good to know that family members are part of that training. So when people leave your facility, that they can self-advocate, for themselves, and also their loved ones can speak on their behalf as well. And well, you're already over there. Okay, and then we'll get to you.
If I could make a suggestion, my many deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria, a lot of people were illiterate. And it didn't matter what type of card that we had that had their language on it. We ended up using cards that had pictures. And there's universal pictures for certain things. I think that would be beneficial if you don't have the appropriate person there to interpret. So, just a suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this is while she's getting the mic, this is very important that we're also here to hear your recommendations, to learn from you as well. So this is an exchange, a conversation of information, ideas, perspectives. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tanya. My question is not more so for mental health or IDD, but more for other disabilities like people that take seizures or those types of things. I specifically have a very close friend who her seizures relate in that she just freezes up, like she doesn't go into like active shaking, but flashing lights trigger that, like strobe lights. How are police or law enforcement trained to deal with that in a situation where, say, you're pulling somebody over and the lights cause them to go into a seizure and it looks like they're being unresponsive to you, but it's a medical condition?
Well, I think to your specific question, we're always looking to see what's going on here. Is there a medical incident here? Is there somebody who's not listening to me? So we're always making that evaluation. So with regard to the traffic stop, the short answer is we're always looking at what is going on here. To take it a step further is if we're coming to your house, that will be something to pass on to us. Hey, listen, you know, my son, my daughter, she suffers from seizures, so if you come with flashing lights, there's a chance you're going to trigger a medical incident with him or her, so can you please not come with flashing lights? And I think, you know, most of us here are of a, well, at least I am, of a generation where my kids are millennials, my kids, they want to know why. So when we're hiring millennials, it's helpful if you tell us why. Hey, listen, please don't come with lights because it may trigger a medical emergency. And when you tell us the why, that dispatcher is going to pass it on, and you're going to get the desired response.
Now, I think that's a very unique question. Thank you, Captain, for answering that question. As you were answering, I was going to where, mostly where she said it's a situation that the individual's pulled over. I've seen I guess I'll call them the strobe lights, where it flicks really, really fast. That may cause that individual to freeze up because they're having a seizure. Caitlin, I'm gonna go to you. Is that something that you all have ever thought about on a situation right there? The person's engaging with law enforcement. Maybe they were not in a disability situation at that time, but that incident triggered that, and it gives the impression that maybe they're not cooperating. And I understand law enforcement will, you know, take their time to assess each situation, but has that ever been discussed in your training?
No, I can't say that specific example.
Right.
It is one of the focuses that we try to take is things aren't always as they seem to be. So there are a lot of times where mental health can also look like particular drug use. So not just assuming that it's one or the other, but that there could be multiple causes. You know, we do talk about seizures, not to the point of lights activating it. Again, that's not as specific as we get, but we do talk about some of those things, and just realizing that just because someone may be in that state where they're not going to actively speak or anything like that, there is more than one cause, and so that constant assessing of there's multiple things that could be happening here, trying to get to the root of it so that we can get the best response possible for that person in a timely manner.
And Steve?
The benefits of working in a prison are we know that they have seizures. We have the treatment team will be well aware that that could be a possibility. So we approach those situations with knowledge already. So it's not really an issue on our end.
Thank you. No more questions? Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I just have a general question. I have close to 20 years with probation and parole and community corrections, and I know we have panel up there, pre-conviction, post-conviction, and how you deal and interact with these issues with disability. And I guess I'm going to make a comment and then ask the panel to respond. I know over the 20 years that back when I first started, there were a lot of available services. There was a lot of available funding to deal with disabilities and mental health disorders. Over time, politics, the political climate, government, prisons started to become shut down. Mental health services, fundings were cut. State police are understaffed because of budget constraints and general law enforcement. So we are where we are now. I don't believe people with disabilities are getting the services that they need. We've never recovered when these actions were taken years ago. So I guess my question to each panel member would be, what would you ask for if you could that would assist you in doing your job in addressing disabilities or the issues that you encounter with individuals, the public with disabilities, in doing your job?
Great question.
It's a very good question.
You want to think about it for a little bit?
One that requires a moment.
I love spending imaginary money.
Yeah.
I do want to start by saying I partially disagree. I feel blessed with our administration from the top down, wanting to support incarcerated individuals with disabilities. We have units for everything, down to a dementia unit. We have the neurodevelopmental unit that I was part of building. We have residential treatment units. We have access to resources, psychologists in every unit, excellent nursing care. I would have to say on our end, I'm truly blessed. Like I said, from the very top down, from the secretary down to all the staff. It's just incredible what we see, what I see on a daily basis as far as caring for individuals with disabilities that are incarcerated. We are really, Pennsylvania is really, I hear it all the time from other people, we're kind of a leader in corrections as far as all of this goes. So I truly feel blessed where we're at. Of course, we can always improve. Of course, there's always things that we could do better. We invest in training our staff too. We're sending everybody we can to learn about how to take care of people with disabilities, and I'm blessed, honestly.
So, but if you, with the imaginary money.
With the imaginary money, I would really, really want to connect. The thing that I think we struggle most with is reentry. We take great care of these guys when they're incarcerated, I'm telling you. But when we are preparing to get someone back in the community, I would like to see more community resources, homes, places like that we can send these guys with staff that are trained, and we can collaborate. If we were able to be like, hey, we've had this guy for 5 years. He is stable, he's doing well, he's communicating, he's had a job in the prison the past 4 years. He got his GED while he was in here, he's set up great, and then this is what we've learned about him, and then we can transition someone back into the community a smoother way. That, to me, would be where I'd want to spend my money.
Find housing, and
Yeah.
find employment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Caitlin, so if you had imaginary money.
I echo that. Reentry is really, I think, where a lot of the resources are starting to be funneled, at least for us, but we definitely need more. Thinking about some of the individuals who are incarcerated in the county jail, so obviously state funding is different than county funding, so we don't have as many programs, housing units, all of those kinds of things. So if we could make individual housing units, like that would be amazing. Right now they're all on one unit and the needs range. And for us, we only have one, what we call a medical housing unit, which could be anyone. And so that gets full, and so they're not all in that one unit, so having the ability to make more than one. But when it comes to reentry, we have a lot of people who unfortunately need a home plan to be released. And for some of those folks, it's not their charge, it's not their length of time, it's their medical component of, well, that housing can't take care of that. They don't have the needs or the abilities to care for that person at that acute of a level. And so that, I think, would be the biggest thing. It's just more housing options for individuals with those kinds of needs.
I think with us, if we're going to have this imaginary funding source, we're probably going to look for more people. We could always use more people. But as an agency, I think that the attitude is a can-do attitude. No matter what the budget is, we're going to give you everything we got. So we're looking to, I said it earlier, treat people fairly. We're going to make sure that everyone gets a fair shake when we interact with them to the best of our ability. And if we had more troopers, then we probably could do more of that. But there's in the real world, there is a limit to funding. And I think, to echo what Steve was saying, I think the administration has been very, very kind to us. We have been fortunate with our commissioner is fantastic. And the attitude is, we're going to be fair and we're going to serve the people regardless of the size of the agency. It very much is a can-do attitude. But if I had more money, I think you can never go wrong with training. I think over the years we have recognized that although we have fantastic instructors in the academy, we do. But I think we have recognized that there's some fields where, as good as we are as for the instructors, we need to bring in the outside resources. So I think we've reached out to experts from like Penn State Health. We've reached out to organizations focused on autism. And we've not just trained the trainer, which is great, but we've brought them in to actually do the training themselves. So I think that's, even without this imaginary money, that's something that we're actually doing in the real world now. We are bringing in the experts to drill into our cadets that, hey, this is something you may experience in the real world. We need to explain this to you, not through your instructors, not through the corporal, the trooper who's teaching you, but like as the experts in the field, we bring them in. We run the cadets through scenarios. So that's, even with real dollars, that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Captain. Okay, there's a question. Yeah, I just have a question. Okay, well, the mic so people can hear you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Hello. Okay. In a perfect world, do you think that it would be beneficial to have a mental health division within each police department, where you have people with degrees in mental health, they know how to handle mental health, but also carry badges and guns as officers, as if they have other specialized units?
I think it's going to be dependent on the agency and the density of the population that they serve. From the state police, when we're looking at the state police, we are, for the most part, a rural police department. We are providing police services in areas that do not have high densities. So to hire somebody who's going to work 8 hours a day and might be, miles and miles and miles away, I'm not sure we're going to get the bang for the buck in that. Versus, Philadelphia City or Harrisburg City, where they have the higher police density, they might get the bigger bang for the buck for that. So I don't want to speak for the city police departments, or really any other police department. I think it's a decision that's made by the local officials based on the input from the people they serve, and they make the best use of the tax dollars that they can.
And may I follow up to your question, just for clarity? I keep hitting this thing. For clarity, are you asking that it would be someone that's a mental health expert that become law enforcement, or they have a badge or something that they will go with law enforcement to assist in a situation?
So I feel, especially with the increased awareness of mental health issues, that each law enforcement agency should have a specialized unit to handle mental health issues. Most families know that their children or their significant other or a family member or even friends have mental health issues. So if they're in a crisis, instead of the police that's generally handling the public, if they're able to identify that my significant other, family member, friend is going through a mental health crisis, that specialized unit that also is a law enforcement officer that's been trained will come out and address that issue versus an untrained cop, police officer, or any type of other law enforcement that's not familiar with mental health issues. A lot of people like to change careers. A lot of people don't like to sit behind the desk. I'm a person that changed careers after 19 years, okay? And there's a lot of people out there that will get their bachelor's degree or master's degree to service the public, and they will also like to be officers as well. So there is room for it, and I feel that nationwide, every law enforcement department that deals with the public should have a specialized unit, especially with the increase in awareness with mental health.
Thank you. Did Caitlin or anybody want to jump in that? Okay.
No, I mean, I just echo what Captain said, just knowing the departments I have in my county. I have a department that's only made up of 4 part-time officers versus the city department that has 150. So very much like he said, like in a perfect world, absolutely, the reality of having 4 part-time officers, the 8 hours that that person may be on, at that point you have to have multiple just to make sure that there's one always on shift, which for some departments, budgetary wise, it's hard. So
why not mandate that one of the 4 positions you have to be a qualified person that can handle mental health issues?
Well,
If you have 4 positions.
one of the challenges I know a lot of law enforcement
I'm sorry.
agencies have is we're trying to get people to join. We're not turning people away. If you're qualified, we want you. So if this is my bio, my degrees are international studies and economics. It's not criminal justice. So we have teachers, we have people from all walks of life who join the state police. If there's somebody who had a mental health background and wanted to join the state police, we'd love to hear from them. We're looking to hire people left and right. So it's not that we don't want those people. We really can't hold a position because we're looking for anybody who wants to go out there and help the public in the law enforcement field. We want them.
Right, I understand that. That's why I started out and saying in the perfect world,
Sure.
because it's not something that we ideally want to have. It's a necessity. Where we are now as a nation is a necessity to have someone trained, even in rural areas, for people with mental health. So they can have any type of social worker background, counseling background, whatever, but that should be a requirement of that specialized position. And they still can address the everyday normal community, but they are there in case there is a specific need for someone in crisis, because a lot of people are dying because the police are not trained and they don't have the capacity to be trained to handle those situations. So it's just something, that's why I started out in the perfect world though. It's something that's needed, and I think everybody in this room would agree. And I think we all know one or more people that have mental health issues. And we're terrified if they have a crisis to call the cops because they might not survive that phone call. regardless of what is related to 911. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there was a question.
It's right here.
Thank you for bringing that to the conversation. Thank you.
Hi, I have a two-part question. First, how do you extend your knowledge base to rural areas and areas that don't necessarily have a lot of the training resources that are available to those in larger areas? That's number one. And number two, you mentioned that, Ms. Caitlin, you mentioned that you do scenarios when you are training, and I love that. At the OAG, Office of Attorney General, we of course have Agent Academy, and we do similar, scenarios with our agents in training. So is that something that you also share with other agencies, where you'll come in maybe as a guest speaker for a day and go over scenarios? Understanding that what you do is weeks upon weeks, but do you do that as well?
Yeah, so in terms of CIT training, and I'll only really speak to that, my chiefs in my county have really taken the stance that they want all of their officers to go through. Whereas when we initially started this, about 12 years ago at this point, it was the belief that a quarter of the staff should be trained. There should be, at least one of 4 trained. Then we got into a lot of our officers in the county work 12-hour shifts, which means so if that one person was trained, there's still 3 that weren't, and that one guy's probably not working Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then he comes back on Monday. So just because one was trained, if it's his weekend off, it's his weekend off. So they've really taken the stance of they want all of their guys to go through. It's harder for the rural departments to send people through because now we're taking one of the very limited bodies that we had off the street for a whole week. We're fortunate in that there have been a lot of grants that have been put out, and that we can actually get those grants to then pay for the officers' overtime for the other ones who have to then work those shifts. So that's something that we've been utilizing just to try to help, because with smaller departments, overtime, it's a big factor about if they can send one of their staff. So that's something that we've been trying to use. And then in terms of the other kind of training, people have always asked for, like, can you do an abridged CIT? And we followed the Memphis model, which is what a lot of counties, agencies use. And so if you want to make a shortened version, you're technically not doing CIT to fidelity then, because there's certain modules you have to hit. It tells you how much time you spend on each one. So we've done an abridged, what we now call communication skills. So we take that active listening component out. So it's still the same training that all the officers get, and it's actually taught by one of our CERT hostage guys, because it's the same training that they go through too. So we do 4 hours of that, and then we do the 4 hours of scenarios. So we've tailored it to, I did it for United Disability Services a couple months ago. I'm doing it for our county mental health office for our caseworkers. So we try to adapt it. So it's not necessarily CIT, but it's the component of it. Yeah.
Okay, I just want to pause real quick second. Do we have any questions from our virtual? Okay. So about 2 more questions because we're getting close to the end of the session. And this person and then this individual over here. Thank you.
2013 saw the Disability Rights Network sue the state of Pennsylvania for 8th Amendment violations in corrections facilities, with solitary confinement being placed upon people with severe mental illnesses.
Yep.
What specific measures has the state taken since then to try to rectify that issue? And further, with discourse about private prisons continuing to pervade common dialogue, are there significant distinctions in treatments for people with disabilities and mental health issues between state-funded and privately funded incarceration facilities?
I can't speak intelligently on private prisons at all, so I apologize for that. But in regard to the first part of the question, we've done wide sweeping changes to how we, solitary confinement is a term that's thrown around, and I would assume that some people, what you picture in your head isn't what's going on. There really isn't much solitary confinement. They're in housing units, they're restricted housing units, they're level 5s. But for the mental health population specifically, we have certain marks we have to get for out of cell time. So they have to spend 10 structured hours out of cell and 10 unstructured hours out of cell per week. And they do a variety of things. They do, leisure activities, learning opportunities, staff, social workers, treatment specialists, psychologists, activities workers, the chaplain. They all come to visit these inmates when they're in a level 5 housing unit. And we're also improving how much time they're in these situations. We're actually increasing the amount of time that non-mental health inmates get out when they're in level 5 housing. So there's been a lot of improvements in that regard, and we're continuing to improve as well. And then the other thing I kind of touched on is how many different specialized units we do have. It's incredible the amount of learning that's going on and how we're learning and evolving in the Department of Corrections. Down to our newest unit that's focused specifically for treating inmates that have autism and intellectual disabilities. So we continue, like I said, we continue to evolve, and we've made a lot of changes, and it's mostly very positive. Yep, thank you.
So I had a question. You had said that when you did the training, you get about 6 hours for mental health, and you said with the PSP, they do training, but what training after they complete that time frame and after they complete being a cadet, do we reinforce that, like periodically, monthly, yearly, every 5 years? Are we reissuing newer knowledge that you guys have received from the development of people learning about disabilities and what things the disabilities have come to light through schooling and through science?
So I'll start off. So this kind of goes back to one of the earlier questions about rural training. So for us, I talked a little bit about training in the academy, but you're right. It's important that we don't stop. So our regulations require every year that there's annual in-service training, and every year a component must be talking about mental health mental health emergencies. Every year it's required. And that's something the state police get. That's something that all the municipal police get, because the state police kind of coordinate the Municipal Police Officers Training Commission. So we make sure that the municipal police are getting mental health training every year. And it's not just, hey, we checked the box, we did it for the year. We're constantly looking at, is there a better mousetrap out there? Next month we have people from LA County coming in to talk to us on how they're dealing with mental health issues in Los Angeles. So we're constantly looking, is there a better way? Should we do something different? It's not just that, yep, we've done that for the year. It is a continual process where we're looking at it.
What about, Steve, what about your officers, or what type of training? Do you get a periodical training for your officers as well?
Yeah, they do an extensive basic training, which does include a lot of ways to communicate. Furthermore, if you're working on a mental health unit or any unit like that, you have to go through the 40-hour CIT course. And then on our more specialized housing units, we do more training with like the Office of Developmental Programs. They come in and they'll help us out whenever we call and ask. They'll come and train us further. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So for the last question, first and foremost, thank you, audience, for all of your questions. You did not disappoint. I was very glad that you were engaging and asking our subject matter experts up here to have this conversation. But to ask each panelist, what is a takeaway that you would like to share with this audience? You know, the one thing the audience should take away from this session, what would it be? Captain, start with you, then we go with Caitlin and Steve.
So I guess the biggest thing I would suggest is that no one can advocate like you. Like, if it's your loved one, if it's you, no one can advocate like you. So be the advocate, be the person who tells the police, hey, this is what will work. We talked, we do the training, we expose our people to a lot of scenarios in the academy. Every year, we make sure at least once a year we're talking about mental health with our people. But no one knows your loved one like you do. So you, when there's a problem, you advocate. You tell us, hey, this is what's going to work for my son, for my daughter, for my sister, my brother. You need to advocate. We, in law enforcement, for the most part, we get into the business to help people. That's why we do it. We want to help people. We want to protect people. That's why we do the job. We work crazy hours, crazy shifts to help people. Sometimes we need your help to be successful. Like, we need to phone a friend. We need you to help us help you. So don't be afraid to, tell us, hey, this is what's going to work with my son, my daughter. We need your help. We want your help. Because we do truly want to help. And if you can help us be successful, we're very appreciative of that. So that's kind of what I would leave you with.
Caitlin, a takeaway?
I guess I'll come at it from the community supervision side, because oftentimes if we have individuals who are on our BHND caseload, their family members are very involved in the process, which is amazing. As probation officers, we are able to accept any information you want to give us. We are not able to disclose any information, and so sometimes that's a source of contention among the officer and the family member. And so unless there is a release that has been signed by the client saying you can talk to my dad, brother, sister, whoever, we're just not able to. But we will happily always take information. So to echo what the captain said, if you have information on triggers, best practices, all of those kinds of things, we're more than happy to receive. We just may not be able to talk about supervision, their case status, all of those kinds of things. It's just not something we're able to do.
Steve?
From the prison side, family support for these individuals is key. No matter what they did or the reason they're there, if you are a family member or you are an advocate at all, and you can support that someone from the outside in, that's the strongest tool that they have. So please support these individuals. If you have good ideas, share them. I did hear a lot of good ideas today, and I'm listening too. I continue to learn. I'm nothing but a humble public servant, and I'm proud of that. And I really want to do good for our community, and my part is in the prison system. So I'm happy to hear any ideas to continue to improve. That's kind of how this all got started. Someone had an idea, and we took it and ran with it, and we actually got ahead of a problem. And I think that that's something that I'm very proud of as part of my role at the Department of Corrections is we didn't react on this one. We got ahead of it, and I'm proud of that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Let's everyone thank the panelists. Audience, thank you as well. This concludes our session. In about a few minutes, it will be, I guess, closing remarks for the conference. If you want to ask the panelists questions more so in a more private setting, they'll be here after